Hello, everyone. Welcome. How you going? I'm just going to wait for a few minutes to let some people join in. See where we're at. Hey, mate, one of my friends from before is back again. Free DXM. Who's that? How are you? Welcome. Just kind of getting a sense of here. You can all hear me, right? Oh, no microphone. 1 second. Hello. Let's just check this microphone. Hello. Can you hear me? Hello. Hi, everyone. Are you good? Okay. Good stuff. Well, at least we got it working now. Excellent. Well, welcome everyone. Let me just get my face out of the screen because it's really distracting me. Hi, thank you for coming. That was slight little panic there when I thought my microphone wasn't working. Whew, I'm glad we got that sorted. So thank you so much everyone for coming, and excited for this webinar that I'm presenting on behalf of YSL Pro in Canada and Adam Audio, of course. My name is Jane Arneson and I am the product specialist for Adam Audio here in Berlin, and I'm coming to you live from our amazing listening room in Berlin. It's kind of a rainy, autumny night tonight. It's a perfect night for thinking about getting into your studio and hunkering down and doing music. So I'm happy to bring it to you. Now, what's the weather? What time is it in Canada? We've got people from Montreal. Amazing, cool. Etienne is there. Awesome. Toronto, Chris from Toronto. Hey, what's up, Chris? How are you? Okay, so tell me what time it is. I'm a little bit confused as to what time it is. 1 p.m. Okay, cool. All right, so it's not a stormy, autumny night like it is in Berlin quite yet in Canada. Okay, so look, let's dive into it. As I said, today we're going to be talking about professional monitoring for mixing audio, and actually, do you know what? I'm just going to move the chat away because it's a little bit distracting. I'll come back to it. So keep the question. Now I'll get to that in a second. Well, actually, let me start with that. Before I kind of get into the talk about the webinar, let me just give you a bit of insight into how I like to run these. It's obviously a weird thing. I'm talking into the little green dot there, but I really do want to get your input and get your feedback and get your questions. I'm here to provide information to you. So please let's throw the questions in the chat. And the way that I kind of tend to roll with it is that I'll talk for a little bit and I'll take a break, check some questions, answer what I can, go back to it. We'll keep on rolling. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll have another opportunity for some more questions. Okay, so as I was saying, so what we're talking about today is there's two aspects to the talk. Now maybe I'll might just go into my full screen here. So there's two parts. So part one is about monitoring, and then the second part is about how we kind of optimize the monitors for your room. So it's kind of basic room acoustics. Now, I'm not an acoustician. I don't pretend to be. And I'm a producer. My background is in production and composition. And, I think that actually having the perspective of someone who's not a scientist in that way is kind of helpful to demystify it, because I think that talking to room acousticians about room acoustics, it can get really heavy really quickly and it gets very confusing. So what I'm trying to do today is I want to talk about monitoring and talk about speakers and understand the different information, different elements that go into the speakers so that you can make empowered choices when you're buying monitors. Obviously, you have to buy Adam monitors. But yeah, regardless, this information is for you to be empowered when you're making your decisions about your purchases. And then the second part is, okay, so you've got these amazing monitors. They're no good if you haven't thought about what's happening in your room. Well, they are good, but in order to really make your monitors come to life, the room is a very important part of it. So that's what we're talking about today. So simple tricks, simple hacks that you can implement in your own kind of room design and adjustment. All right, I'm just going to do a quick check-in to make sure everything's going okay before I roll in. Cool. Okay. Oh, we've got people from Mexico, Poland. Amazing. Wow. Good stuff. All right. So back to work. Right. So the first question I want to throw out to us all is, which monitor is right for me? And now that's a big question, is I think in general, like across the board with everything, there's so many options and we don't know what's right for us. So I want to kind of talk through that. As I have here with my point, the first thing I want to say is the perfect monitor doesn't exist. It just doesn't. You know, like one of the things when I was talking to our product designers here, is that when I was, we're discussing about how many drivers and, crossover in points and frequencies and different things like this, and different material for woofers and tweeters. And, you always have to make sacrifices based on things like quality, size, weight. So what we're doing as a speaker company is we're trying to make the best situation, balancing many different variables. So that's a really important thing to understand, I think. So what you need, the better question is, which is the right monitor for me, and what are the variables that I can kind of interact with? So, there's things like active or passive, or near field or midfield, or do I need mains monitors? Do I need a sub or not? And what about analog or DSP? Do I need EQ on board, and what does that even do? Okay, so these are the kinds of things that we want to think about. And this is obviously before you then start to think about the brands. So I've got a bunch of pictures here of different monitors, some Adams monitors, some S5Hs in the mains monitored in the bottom right. We've got obviously, the legendary Yamaha NS10s, sorry, not NX10s, some older Adams models down the bottom left. So there's lots of different ways that monitors exist in our professional studios. Let's think about it. So when we think about what is right for you, we're thinking about your taste. Taste always comes into it. And then we're thinking about, okay, the room that you have, the type, the size of the room. And I think really importantly is the type of work that the monitors will be doing. So maybe it's genre related. It's also related to whether or not you're a producer or a mix engineer or a mastering engineer. These things will impact the requirements of the monitor, let's say. So let's do a first check-in. What are the components of a speaker? So what even is a speaker all about? There's not that much to it, but every part plays a very important role. So we have obviously an amplifier. Well, not obviously, because maybe it's passive, but generally speaking, well, often it's an amplifier. We have the housing or the cabinet, we have the connector, and we have the driver. So now I think even with, let's say, something like the housing or the cabinet, people might not think too much about it. They just go, okay, it's a box that everything goes into. And, that's not the case at all. There's a lot of time and great science and detail put into optimizing the cabinet for things so we don't have vibrations and the woofer noise and port noise and things like this. So, every part is playing a very important role. And of course, we say here we can have more than one driver in the speaker. We have woofer, which is a low frequency driver, the tweeter, the high frequency driver, and the mid-range driver. I don't know if the mid-range driver has got a fancy name like woofer or tweeter. Does anyone know that? Maybe you can throw it in the chat if you know if there is a special name for the mid-range driver. All right. And of course, we also have filters. If you have more than one driver, we need to have filters to cross over the frequency overlap between the different drivers. Okay, so what are the components of the speaker? We can see here we've got our three drivers: tweeter, mid-range driver, and woofer. And that's modeling these three drivers is the Adam S3V. Okay, so moving on to active or passive. Now, I think a lot of people don't really understand what the difference between active or passive actually is. So I think a lot of people think that the difference is that passive needs to be powered, and active have an amplifier built in. And that's kind of part of it, but it's not actually the full story. So I find this really interesting. So I hope that you'll find it as well interesting. Now I actually am just going to make this large so you can see it a bit better. Oh yeah, Rick, I saw your comment there. There we go. Okay, this is better, much better. Right, so if I just, sorry, let me just go back one. So the difference between active and passive monitors, maybe if you think you know the answer, put it into the chat there and let's see what you think. Now the answer is that it's the stage that the crossover, where you can see here that where we have the active crossover, which is before the amp, or whether it's after the amplification. And again, that might not seem like it's too much of a deal, but when you start to think about, I think I compare this to, let's say, my insert chain when I'm mixing or something. So if I have an amp or a gain or a compressor or some kind of dynamics processing before or after my EQ, it does have an impact. It changes it. Okay, so that's just information for you to know and to digest. So okay, beyond that, what's the difference between active and passive, and why do you care? I guess. I mean, I think that certainly there's the reality that it's more convenient because it's active, it's all there together. And passive can end up being more expensive because you need to get a devoted amplifier. I think for me though, if I was to, I do prefer active monitors generally, and for me, I think I like it because the amps have been, they've been conceived and they've been built and they've been perfectly tuned to fit with the speakers and the enclosure and the drivers. So I like that aspect of it. So ultimately, I think that there's arguments for both, but that's just my insight into it. So in terms of thinking about amplifiers is the next aspect, right? So we've talked about the monitors, whether they're powered or not. So if they are powered, what kind of power are we using? Now with Atom amplifiers, we use both Class D and also Class A and B. The S series uses the Class D amps, and they're used on the low and mid range drivers. And I think it's S5s. I've forgotten, but I'm pretty sure it's the S5s onwards. You also use the Class D amps in the tweeter. Now, what is the benefit of Class D amps? And as I've got here in large bullet point, it is that you have very low distortion. It's very, very clear and very little artifacts from the process of the amplification. So they're also really efficient. They don't waste energy, and they also last longer. So that's the benefit for them. So if we're showing all these benefits, why on earth would you use anything else? And the answer really comes down to price at the moment anyway. So if we have let's say our mid-range developing aspiring producer range, as we call it, the AX range, well, they would, if we put Class D amps all the way through them, we wouldn't have been able to get the competitive price point. So often as we go down to the Class A and B, often in the price range, what you would get for the similar price range of Class D amp, these Class and AB amps do perform very competitively in terms of the bandwidth and the tone that they reproduce. And also just one point there that Atom, we've developed our own AB amp for our bespoke S Art tweeter, which is another bit of info for you. Right. Now, I'm going to break in a second to get some feedback. I'm going to ask you all, before I go into my tweeter thing, what kind of tweeters do you like? Do you like ribbon tweeters, cone tweeters, or metal tweeters? Or do you not know and you don't know the difference? So put in some comments in the chat, and after I finish talking about this, I'm going to come back and see where you're at. So I think that tweeters can be, and again, this is something when I'm in people's studios or when producers and mix engineers are hanging out and talking together, they're always, talking gear and whatever. And I think that people have a really strong opinion about tweeters for whatever reason. And I think that often it's misinformed. And I guess that I'm kind of interested. Well, it comes from the perspective of the differences between the cone and ribbon quite often. So maybe I like this quote. I got this from the Vintage King blog, and I'm just going to read it. So, handling the high frequency side of things, tweeters come in many different forms, but there are three types of predominantly used in the studio. So, soft dome, ribbon, or metal. Now, this is the good stuff, I think. All three bring different elements to the table. The soft dome is thought to be more manageable for longer sessions, and the ribbon offers a larger area of frequency that allows for making easier decisions, and the metal tends to be more detailed. Now, I think that the important things there is that the difference between the dome and the ribbon, people say that ribbon tweeters can be, ribbon tweeters can kind of be fatiguing on your ears. I mean, and I've worked with both. I've worked with them for a long time. I've also worked with Adam before I worked for the company, I've had Adam for about 15 years. And I think that, and again, this is for you to make your decision ultimately, but my feedback on it is, as a producer, when I'm producing, I don't always need the detail of the ribbon tweeter. But as a mix engineer, I would be lost without the detail of the ribbon tweeter. So I really appreciate that high frequency detail that you get. And now let me give you on this slide here a little bit of information about it. Why do you get the detail? Well, the ribbon tweeters, you can see in the diagram, it's 4 times the size of a dome tweeter. And so we're getting, it's the air loading is increased significantly. So you basically, the easy way to understand it is that it takes a lot more energy to get the same, output of frequency. So that means that all of the device is working. It's not working that hard. So we have lots of headroom. So what does that mean? We get less distortion and less coloration. So it's a clear, precise, uncolored sound, which as a mix engineer, that's exactly what I want. So I really enjoy it for that. Now, again, this is just like my little Jane's opinion piece comment moment. Again, for me, as I said, the cone tweeters smear the high frequencies a little bit for me. I find, as I've said, the ribbon tweeters are really neutral and transparent. And now one final thing is that people often say ribbon equals ear fatigue. I say that's false, because I would say that listening at too loud levels equals ear fatigue. If you're listening at, what are the guidelines that I work by is 85 dB for no longer than 2 hours and take a break. And I have short bursts of it being louder, and I also try and work with it softer. So if you're going to be putting any speaker above 85 dB for long periods of time, you're going to be in trouble. So that's just my input. And I think the final thing to say here is that ultimately I think it's important for you to listen to different types of speakers, take some time, and start to learn and hear the differences and find out what feels good to you. Because often, ultimately it's your vibe. It's what feels good for you. So let's just have a little pause there and let's see where we're at. Cool. Okay, so a lot of people are kind of saying they don't know the difference. Montobia Classroom Guitar Association has A7Ss. Nice one. Yeah, they are ribbon. Yep. Cool. So we've got some people listening to the Neumanns. They're lovely as well. Really good. Which mic am I using here? This is a dynamic mic. It's a dynamic USB mic. It's a really cheap one. It's just, yeah, it works, eh? Resin is working using a ribbon. Nice one. Okay. Awesome. Great. So it's interesting. I think that's, to start to think about these details about like what are all the differences between these different components. Okay, let's keep rolling. Okay, so we've thought about the amplifier. We've thought about the tweeter. Now, another thing to think about is, do you need a mid or a near field monitor? Or do you want mains monitors? So you see here we have the Atom S3V can be used. It's quite a versatile monitor, but in my opinion, it works best as a midfield monitor. We've got the old NS10s appearing there, which are near field. Also, A7Xs are absolutely amazing near field monitors. The S2Vs are also amazing near field monitors. And then we've got some S5Hs in the other picture there, which is they're being used as mains monitors. So why would you use any of these? Like, why? And in my opinion, just to keep it really simple, it's really based on the size of your room. If you don't have 2 to 4 meters of space from your listening position, so if I'm sitting here, if I don't have, a large room, then I shouldn't be using midfield monitors because I don't need them, So if you have, a kind of space where from here, I've got about 2 meters beyond until the wall. So I can't really be using midfield monitors in this room unless I move the listening position like way back. And then I'm probably going to be getting into the wrong kind of spot in the room where I'm going to get some weird room resonances. So it really does depend on the size of your room. The other thing about mains monitors is that generally they're housed in the walls. So if you're going to input your monitors into the wall, then you need to think about things like heat and airflow, and that's really, really important thing to consider if you want to do that. So what's special about Atom monitors? This isn't, I'm not trying to kind of give a hard sell here, but I do think I do want to kind of talk a little bit about why I really like Atom's monitors and why I use them. So I think that what we're trying to achieve really is a very high level of sound reproduction, obviously. Low distortion, loud SPL with lots of headroom and no kind of feeling of compression or kind of pressure on the signal for it to have movement and space in the sound. It's very important for it to be stable and robust. And I can tell you, my A7Xs, I bought them about 12 years ago, and they've been through a few moves and they've been dropped a few times, and they sound absolutely perfect. So they're very robust. I remember back in the day when you would have paper cone woofers and you'd sneeze and they would break. So they're really, really robust and hardy speakers. And also another one I think is really interesting that I didn't fully understand before I was working for Atom is about how much work it takes to reduce artifacts and resonances and ringings and vibrations, which are a natural reality whenever you get SPL, whenever you get vibration, sound is that it's resonance. We have sympathetic resonances and things happening. And so that's a lot of time and effort is put into reducing all of those extra artifacts that we don't want. Okay. So yes. So yeah, as I said before, I've said the really important thing for me as a mix engineer is that I have clarity and I think space. So not to feel as though the sound is like feeling tight or condensed or compressed. So this kind of lots of headroom and lots of space helps me to really hear all of the details that I need to when I'm doing my mixing and whatnot. Okay, I've already talked about the tweeter. Now I'm not going to go into more detail about the the drivers here now because we kind of need to keep on moving. But this information that you can see here, it's all on the Atom website, and I really encourage you to check it out and read it. It's great education, lots of really good information. Obviously specific about Atom monitors, but it applies to really all speakers. So please go ahead and check that out. Also, the bass driver that we have developed as well. And as I was saying before about this is a symmetrical magnet assembly, these are the detail about how we reduce resonances and how we design the cabinet so that it's working to its optimum. Waveguides. I do want to say something about the waveguides because I think that they have a really practical impact. The waveguides are designed so that they disperse I kind of like to the directionality of the sound. So if, without the waveguide, they would tend to just kind of come at you in this way. The waveguides will kind of smear it and allow that the field of transfer of the sound, I guess, to be wider. And now, okay, so why do we care about that? The reason that that's great is because when you're working and you're mixing and you're moving your head, or you're changing this, or you're going to your compressor or whatever, you can move around and it's not going to really mess with your head. It won't sound really different if you move your head around. And again, that's a really practical thing. It really has a great benefit when you're working, and when you're working a lot, you really notice those things. Yeah. So again, more about the cabinet. I'm really into the cabinet design. Someone was saying that with the S series, the cabinets, they look like Mercedes-Benz mufflers. Yeah, they're very cool. Okay, let's pause for a little second and see if there's any kind of questions. Right. Okay. So Kevin has asked a question here. Other than price, why Atom versus Head? Now, I really don't know too much about the difference, other than that they've shared a history, Atom and Head, with the designers being part of Atom in the past. Now, I think Head are really excellent monitors. Of course, Atom just are the best. So that's just the way it is. But I mean, again, like, jokes aside, I would encourage you, as I've said before, go somewhere and listen to the monitors, and really just decide for yourself what feels good for you. Okay, so Becoming Sound says, could you speak to adding an Atom sub? I have an A7X and I'm thinking about adding a sub 10. I'm going to come back to that. So let's talk about that a little bit further. Okay, I'm going to keep on rolling them. Okay, so now I want to talk about what level or series, because we have different, 3 different series that are priced in different ranges. The T series, which is our entry-level monitors, the AX series, which is our kind of mid-range, which is for our aspiring professionals, and we have our S series, which is really high-end monitoring for people that are working full-time in studios as engineers and producers. We also have subwoofers, which Becoming Sound is interested in, and we have our headphones, our HP5s, which I've got some HP5s here. Yeah, very cool. So I think that, just to talk about the different series, I think that to use the T series, I think if you're just starting out, and what does that mean? If you're mainly doing demos and production, and you will get it mixed elsewhere, maybe your room is untreated, and your work is for production and being creative, not mixing and mastering. If that is you, then the T series is a really great choice. Okay, particularly if you're starting out. They're very, very good, clear, also fun. They feel nice. They're an enjoyable monitor to listen to. Then I would say this is a really great place to start. If you are producing, let's say, at home in a room that you've done some treatment, or maybe you even have your own kind of studio setting, you also might be a producer who's starting to mix your own work, or maybe you're someone who's getting more into mixing, so you're interested to invest in treatment in your room to optimize it. Then I think that the AX series is a really good option for you. I wouldn't say that I would recommend these for mastering, because I still think that they lack some of the detail that we will get in the S series as well. So if we go on to the S series, the S series is the best of what we can offer, with no sacrifices. Obviously, there's a price point to match that. It is a serious investment, but they're absolutely, divine kind of monitors to work with. I work with them. You would be working as a professional producer, particularly mix engineer. I think these are they really thrive in the mixing environment. And I think if you're going to take an investment to get an S range type monitor, it's time to start investing more seriously in treating your room and making sure that that's working for you. I think that it's really important to do listening tests and to think about what are the difference between speakers. Now, one of the things that and again, this is another question to throw out to you, what do you listen for? If you're doing a listening, because that's the other thing, you tell people to go and listen to, go somewhere and listen to speakers. And they're like, okay, what do you listen to? And how do you listen? I think is the other really important thing to think about. So tuning in and the critical ear and listening into the detail, the frequency response, and really noticing the different nuances in the ranges in the low frequency. Not just that there's sound in the low frequency, but is it clear? Is there detail? Can you hear transients? Can you hear, the detail of different movement of rhythmic aspects to the music or the sound? I think the clarity and detail throughout the frequency range is very, very important thing to understand. The next thing that I think is important is headroom. So that it feels, and the headroom, how does that impact practically? As I said before, I feel like I can breathe. I think that's the best way I can say it, that it feels light and there's air and there's space. So, a speaker that's pushing its limits is going to feel really, really tight. And when something's really tight and driving very hard, then of course you're going to start to lose detail as well. Now, related to headroom is kind of depth, I think. So you start to get a sense of more of the spatial experience. So starting to listen in to see if you can really hear the tail of that reverb kind of moving into the background. These are the kind of details that you want to be trying to listen to and hear about. So let's see if anyone's what do they listen to? Well, no one's put up there what they listen to when you're doing listening tests. Throw it up. What do you listen to? Actually, another question to put out there. What are your favorite listening test tracks? I listen to, what are some of mine? Michelle Ndegeocello and Erykah Badu for my low end, my bottom end. Clear, powerful, punchy, Anyway, I'll just give you two. So everyone, let's share some of your favorite listening test tracks and I'll come back to it. Okay. So moving on. Right. Okay. So just to kind of wrap up, we're talking about monitors. Let's bring it all back in together. So what should you look for? I think that when you're thinking about a monitor speaker, you want to think about the frequency response. And now the frequency response, that impact, that it depends what music you're doing, right? If you're doing lots of bass music or if you're doing techno and things like that, you probably want a lot of low frequency response and you want detail there. This is a time when you would be thinking about getting a sub. So becoming sound, we're thinking about getting a sub. Do you need it and why would you get it, right? And I think it's important to understand, like here with the indication of SPL at the lower frequency ranges, because often different brands or whatever, they'll put the SPL and they won't say the SPL at lower frequency, because quite often lower frequency it rolls off. So I think that's important as well for you to think about. Also get an insight about the total harmonic distortion. So, cheaper monitors will distort more readily. And again, as I said before, when in a speaker, you want clarity with least amount of distortion is what we're looking for. And also, when you're matching your sub to speakers, you want to think about the power output and think if it makes sense. And of course, one little point here, it is all marketing. People are in the game of selling things and, obviously it's the way it is. So I think it's important for you as a consumer to be educated and to, know the difference between spin and truth. So, I think, and again, I feel really confident to say Adam has really great information. The website is very detailed. There's lots of really great information there for you to get more insight into all these kind of specs and things like that. But finally, I've got to say, at the end of the day, it's your ears and your gut that should be making the decision. So trust your ears, listen to music that you love, that you know very well, and make a decision based on what feels right to you. Okay, here's some of the frequency response diagrams. Okay. Yeah, as I said, also one other point that I'll bring here is that, which is the fourth point down there. If you're making a really big investment, let's say you're ready to buy some S series monitors, we will do our best to provide you with those into your studio for a week or two. If you're a producer, we can have it. Well, we can have a chat about it. So if there are some people that are listening there that are at that stage, do have recording studios and would like to take some of the S series monitors for a test drive, that's something that we can certainly discuss. So get in touch with us and we'll see what we can organize for you. All right, let's check in one more time. Oh, cool. Okay, so what have we got? We've got Kevin A. I listen to Moments in Love, The Art of Noise. That's awesome. Yeah, that's a really, really good one. Resin, is it Reza? Reza, yeah, that's right. I always have to try Timbaland. Yeah, definitely. And listening for clarity, detail, and frequency response. Yeah, Timbaland's a good one as well in that same way, the clarity of that low end. Drum and bass, loads of 80 to 100 hertz bass. Yes. I mean, 80, don't you think like 40? It's low and it's loud. So Petra is listening to Change the World by Eric Clapton. That's a really good one for the detail, and particularly the detail in the low mid-range of the guitar, and you will really hear the difference with these, with certain monitors in that song, definitely. So someone's asking about S2Vs, but it hasn't happened. Oh, okay. So let's chase that up. I think Rick is on the line there, and so maybe he's one of our sales peeps, and we'll follow that up for you. So yeah, let's figure out what's going on there. Okay, so now let's move back to part 2, or move on to part 2, which is guidance about positioning your speakers in your room and like basic acoustics. Okay. So, and I think it's interesting because one thing I want to say before I get into this is that, and I'm included in this, is that a lot of people kind of know a bit about what they should do, but they don't do it. So this is the thing, is that it does require a little bit of, you have to have a weekend, I guess, when you kind of fiddle around with stuff. But it is a bit fiddly, so you do have to take a little minute with it. So if you're one of those people, because I was like that for years, I knew what I needed to do, but I just didn't do it. So if you're one of those people, I really encourage you, because since I have taken the time to be a bit more precise and do all the things that I always talk about doing to other people, I did them for myself in my studio. Wow, I really notice a difference. Okay. So that said, these are the things that I would encourage you to be paying attention to when you're going to do that in your room. Okay. The first one is thinking about positioning in relation to the room dimensions. So, I even had a discussion with a very famous mix engineer, 80s mix engineer, who was arguing with me that it should be on the short side. No, definitely the sound should come out and play along the long side of the room, as is demonstrated by this picture here. Okay, so the 38% rule, so we want it to kind of be around that kind of third-ish part of the room, and we want to avoid the kind of symmetrical points in the room. So this is, when you're thinking about room acoustics, there's certain things where symmetry is bad because it amplifies room modes. Okay, so that's important to think about. So how far should your monitors be from the listening position? So I've mentioned this before, but I'll say it again. So you've got your near field to be 1 to 2 meters away. So, and then if you're going to have midfield, I should have said midfield, not far field, they should be between 2 to 4 meters. Then the next thing is thinking about where do the speakers go in relation to the listening position. So with your near fields, it should be, the idea is for it to be, 60 degrees, 30 from the center point. Now, of course, the equal distance, people talk about the equidistant triangle from like my head to the speakers. That's the kind of the good way to design it. Yes, and I think that's really good. And I think one of the other things that I notice all the time when I go into studios is that the speakers are not facing towards a listening position. And actually, I'm in the room right now, and I can see that the speakers here, I've got some T5Vs here. The speakers are positioned so that the sound is kind of coming here, but not to my head. So thinking about when you just getting the position so that the tweeters are kind of looking at you, I think that's pretty important. Now, another issue that comes up is, do you want the speaker to be, when you want the speaker to be ear height, okay, is it the tweeter or the woofer that is ear height? Now, there actually is a debate about that, and I think that from my perspective, I like it to be kind of more towards the tweeter because I want the detail, and it's also more directional. The frequency, the high frequencies are very directional, so that's the stuff that I kind of need to be, it's going to be moving in whatever direction that we send it. But again, I would say with all of these guidelines, we set it up based on the guidelines, and then we nuance it to based on when it feels right. And of course, the speaker height should be 120 to 140 centimeters. You do have to be a little bit careful when you tilt speakers. Like sometimes it's unavoidable, but you can get different kinds of reflections and kind of phasing issues and bouncing issues when you do that. So you do need to be aware of it. Now, the bass null is something that is, I don't know if people, again, were kind of aware of it or not, but in a really simple way to do this. In fact, I used to do this in a studio that I had that was really badly treated, and I used to walk into the different corners of the room so I could hear what was going on in the bass part of my mix. But anyway, it's a really good thing, I think, for all of us. And again, this is for you to like really embody yourself in your production or mixing space. Take a minute to walk around and really absorb what's happening with the frequency response and the reflections and the movement. Have you ever done that? We kind of just set the room up and start working. So I think that maybe just take a little minute, again, listening to music and start to get a sense for where those nulls are and where those high energy areas are as well. So another thing that happens quite often is speaker boundary interference, and because often people will say, okay, so I've positioned my speakers 2 meters from my listening position. I've got the angle right, is facing me. I've got the degrees and the angles. I've thought about my first reflections. I've done all of that stuff, and there's problems with the frequencies. Now, this is the final one, which I think it can be quite confusing, but it's speaker boundary interference, and it was when it's particularly related to problems with the bass. And it's when you have the bass frequencies, it goes from the speaker out the back, because of course the low frequencies are omnidirectional. It goes out the back, it bounces off the back wall, and it comes back in. And I'll go to the next slide, and it comes in, and if it happens to just coincidentally be at a certain length, it will cancel. It could either cancel that frequency, or it will boost the frequency if it's a node or an antinode. Right. Okay. So that's like, oh God, how can I deal with that? Now, the best way for me to kind of demystify this is if you feel like something's going on weird with your bass, in that there's some boominess, or it's areas where it's cancelled out, it could very likely be speaker boundary interference. I would encourage you to move your speakers like a little bit, move them back a touch to disrupt the symmetry of the wave that's happening, or forward, or just kind of move them a little bit and see how that works. Often it's like magic. The frequency appears again, and you've done something very, very, very small. Now, it is small adjustments are going to have a big impact here, because you don't want to move it into another symmetrical point, right? So small adjustments. Also, if you want to be a little bit more scientific about it, there are calculators online. I've got one here, wall bounce calculators you can try out, and they'll give you an indication of where things will be and where it will be beneficial for you to move the speaker to, basically. Right, now, adjustments with EQ. So there's a lot of, particularly these days, there's things like SonarWorks, there's also different EQ adjustment options in different doors and things like that, or the front end of audio interfaces. And now more and more speakers are coming with quite detailed EQ components to them. So the S series has a really amazing and really advanced EQ with linear phase EQ, not non-linear, linear phase, so that we don't create phase issues when we're going to be EQing things out. So yes, adjusting EQ is kind of everywhere. Now, I think that it's also really misunderstood again, because people think something like SonarWorks, oh, cool, just turn it on, do the measurements, and it's going to fix all my problems. That is not always the case, because sometimes, like with SBI, speaker boundary interference, if let's say that there's the frequency, it notices 330 hertz or something is missing, and then it does an EQ curve and it pushes it up. Well, that has been cancelled out because of a room node. Pushing more of it into the room is not going to do anything for you. And that's the same thing, across the board with things like that. So sometimes it will work, but not always. Now, the way that I kind of approach it is that the EQ adjustment happens right at the end when I've done all of these other things. And I've really taken the time to nuance and get it all feeling really good. And then I'm listening to it and I can hear subtle little issues that I might have with certain aspects of the frequency range. Nothing really dramatic, right? If I'm trying to do dramatic fixes, I would generally think you can do it a better way by positioning the speakers in your room or by acoustic treatment in your room. So in this time, I'll do little adjustments, cuts and boosts. Now, the important thing to understand is that everything has a payoff. So if you start EQing, when you EQ, the more you do it, you will introduce issues with time. So you're going to be creating smearing because any EQ introduce certain elements of phase or phase misalignment. So you lose the clarity, okay? So more EQ that you're doing to smooth out the frequency, you do sacrifice clarity. So be aware of that. Okay, I'll just leave the tips for using EQ there for a minute. I'm going to check in. You can read that yourselves, and let's check out what people are saying. So yeah, people are saying that, Nugs Media, 40 hertz, drum and bass, let's go down low. So a tweeter height or just slightly under tweeter height. Yep, that's also the go. Certainly some people like to kind of have it lower into the mid-range driver. That's not really my vibe. So yeah, whoever's doing the drum and bass needing thick bass traps, yeah, I mean, maybe you need bass traps, maybe you don't. It really depends on the room that you have and what's going on in it. Again, I think that people kind of go crazy bass trapping things and not necessarily understanding what they're doing. You still want bass there. You don't want to make. And again, this is another question. Do you want your room to be lively or do you want it to be really, really dead, like a kind of post room? It has a different impact on it. I mean, for me, I like my room to be a little bit alive because I'm in it all the time. And if I'm in almost like an anechoic chamber, it makes me kind of depressed, to be honest. So I need it. It needs to be functional. Do you know what I mean? So the perfect room, like the perfect anything, doesn't exist. It's about finding what works for you. So, yeah. So Resin is saying, do you measure the room to anticipate the standing waves? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely part of the process. I think that for the discussion that I'm having today is about how before you get into getting deep into the kind of acoustics and measuring standing waves and using Room EQ Wizard and all that stuff, there's stuff you can do even before that. So using these kind of approaches, I think is a really good starting point. Definitely don't want a dead room for mixing. Yeah, no thanks. All right. Okay, so let's talk, and now coming in to talk about simple acoustic treatment. So as I said, I think that doing these adjustments and getting and this is also something that I've had an insight to this where I had an acoustician that was designing a really high-end studio that I was involved with, and I came in to do some of the listening, and so I had the opportunity to ask them to watch what they were doing, and I was actually really surprised. What they were doing was like these subtle. I thought that it was all going to be calculators but they really were listening and making little adjustments, So, I think that that's important to remember, that it's not just about measuring and just about numbers. It is also responding to the room. One of the things that they did also was walking around the room and try and find the optimal placement for the speakers before they started measuring for standing waves and stuff like that. So, I didn't know about that either, and I think that's kind of interesting. So, simple acoustic treatment. Decouple your speakers from their stands. Definitely do that. Get some foam or rubber underneath it, no problems. If you have your speakers on your desk, I think it would be better to get one of those little desk stands, because it just raises them up a bit rather than using the foam and pointing them up at your ears. I think it's better to do that. That's my personal preference. So once we've decoupled and we've got our speakers set, then apply some simple acoustic treatment. So this is acoustic treatment on the first reflection path. So that is where, it comes out of the speakers, you forget the first hit, and then where does it fly off first and come back into your ears. So that first reflection path is above your head, down on the floor, to the left and right at your ear level, and in front of your head, I guess, behind the speakers, and then at the back wall. So thinking about that first reflection path is really important. And what type of treatment? Well, you're using diffusers here because you want it not to come back at your ear, right? You want it to hit there and kind of get diffused into the room so that you're not getting these kinds of things like flutter and, oh gosh, my mind's gone blank. Things to sound bad. Let's put it that way, of things coming at you at the exact kind of angle and multiplying. Bass traps in the corners of the room. So whoever said put thick bass traps, yes, bass traps are definitely, part of the solution. I was reading an article recently. Someone was talking about corner bass traps not being effective. I don't know if that's true. I'm not here to talk about it. What I would say though is to think about what is the appropriate solution for you and for your room. Bass traps in the corners. Maybe you have some floating bass traps. I really like floating bass traps, actually. I think that they work really well for me as well. And here's a little diagram to show you what that looks like. We've got diffuser on the back wall. Then we have bass traps in the corner. And then we have some smaller diffuser absorbers, I would say, at the ear level on the sides as well. And that would be, if you do this, this will really give a great benefit to your room. Some low cost options here for, kind of things when you're just starting out. These are definitely beneficial. I think that there's better options out there, but this, again, if you're just kind of starting out and you're not sure and you don't want to maybe dive in and spend loads of money, this is a good place to start to experiment and learn and explore this kind of world of acoustic room adjustment and treatment. If you really want to go geeky, there's a book that I think is very good, Sound Reproduction by Floyd Toole, and it's talking about loudspeakers and rooms. There's lots of really good information in there. So if you want to go deeper into this, I encourage you to check that out. There's also a really great webinar from many years ago by my mate. Well, he's not my mate, but I read his books. Bobby Owsinski. He did a talk about acoustics, and it's a really good practical kind of chat. So I encourage you to check that out as well. All right, I think that brings us to the end of our webinar. So someone's using the Zior Mesa stands. Yep, I've heard they're really good. Now hang on a sec. I just want to get to. I might just go large again, everyone. So yeah, thank you everyone so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, we'll stay kind of online for another 5 minutes. Actually, one of the questions was about, I'm going to come back to the question about the sub. So without understanding exactly, there's two questions that I would ask you. One is, what size is your room? Two is, what are the realities of having loud bass music? Because subs definitely really do travel. What kind of music are you making? I assume if you're wanting a sub that you're making bass music. Cool. If you have considered all of this information and you want a sub to add to the A7X, A7X have a really great bass response. They're really, really good. And I would say that from a personal perspective, I have mixed on A7X without a sub for like 10 years and had very little problem with the low end. Anyway, however, what sub would you get to pair with the A7X? The sub 10 I think is a good option. But again, how big's your room? So if your room is larger, then maybe you would need to go for a larger sub. Now, someone's saying, what size speakers would you recommend for a 12 by 25 room? I actually can't give you the answer off the top of my head. I need to do the sums, and there's it's really easy to find it online. There's recommendations for it. I mean, you can also send me an email and I can give you some advice if you want to, but I can't. I'm sorry. It's also Friday night and I've had a really busy week and I think my brain's about to go into shutdown mode. So I can't give you exact answers for that just at the moment. So what else have we got here? Etienne just got his Thomann stands. Sweet. Good on you, mate. Nice one. Okay, so Becoming Sound says a small sized room, fully decoupled, high mass control room. Okay, cool. Right. So you're ready for getting a sub. The sub 10, definitely obviously no bigger than the sub 10. It will be too much for your room. I think that seems like a good pairing, A7X and sub 10. We can, and also, you know, and again, I think to talk with your dealer, maybe talk to the people if you're in from Canada at the YSL Pro, you know, talk to your dealer there and they'll also be able to give you more specific information. But what you suggested there seems like a good idea to me. All right. I think that's it, everyone. Thanks again. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for participating and making me not feel alone here talking to a green dot. It's always good, and I appreciate all the questions. I hope that this was interesting and beneficial, and that you got stuff out of it. And I guess happy music making. And yeah, I hope to hear from you again, and I hope to see you at some of my webinars in the future. See you later.